First of all, good morning, everyone, and can I also extend a very warm welcome to you all. It's a little bit strange not being able to see anyone or hear anyone other than the few people that we have in the lecture theatre here today, but I'm told you're out there. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. And I'll say a few thanks in a moment about people who are hopefully going to make today very special. Sandra, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for the warm-up. Already we can tell that you've worked for the police too long because you've told us all to put our seatbelts on, which is a great sort of strapline, of course, for the public as well. But thank you very much for the warm-up, Sandra, and for putting together today's event. I know you worked very hard on it. I'm very grateful. Thank you. I wanted to say a few things, really. And the first is that I feel very blessed that we found Sandra and people like Teddy, who I know I hope is listening, and we're going to hear from Teddy in a little while. Coming across great people to help us to learn and get better is a privilege, and we found Sandra, who is now embedded as our Better Together manager and doing some tremendous work already. So keep that coming, please, Sandra, and I'm pleased that you said yes to come and join us. It's a real privilege for us. If proof through action is important, and of course it is, then I wanted to start off a little bit before I got into a bit more about what drives me in relation to diversity, inclusivity and representation more generally. And it's the fact that we should be optimistic about some of the progress that we've been making together. I'll put some caveats to that in a moment, but I think about our recruitment of Sandra and her team, our establishment of something that we're now calling the Legitimacy Panel, and Teddy is the chair of that at the moment and has helped to establish that. Not an easy thing to do, actually, and requires a lot of patience and skill from people from the community to come and sit through some tricky stuff and help us. More on that perhaps if we need to talk about it later, but we've established the panel with Teddy's help. Our Better Together programme, they're two words, better together, but they mean so much and they can mean so little if we don't embrace them with authenticity. And again, that may come out a little bit in more detail today. It's linked to what we would call our employer of choice ambition. We want to be an organisation where people don't just come along because they can't get a job anywhere else. They want to come and work here because why wouldn't they? And regardless of their race or their background, whether they're disabled or from a Chinese community, who cares? What we want are people to come and work with us because they want to be here, because we're doing some noble work. It's tricky at times, but we are definitely better together. And the more people that we have helping us to problem solve some of those challenges, the better we will be for the public. So I almost want difference to be irrelevant because I want everyone to feel able to thrive in an organisation like ours. And so that's what we're loosely calling becoming an employer of choice. And that too requires a lot of thought and some mistakes along the way. But that's where the Better Together programme links in with some of the other work that we're doing with colleagues within HR and beyond. We have some recruitment champions. We have a mentoring scheme now in place for underrepresented communities. And of course, our celebration, our contribution to Black History Month really starts in earnest today with our keynote speakers today, but activities throughout the month. And as Sandra said, recognising it throughout the year. And that all helps us to become better equipped, better advised, better representation within our workforce mix, better retention. So if we can create a nicer environment, a more equal environment, people who take a risk to come and join us, who might be nervous or cautious about what they might find, could actually feel confident to stay. And we have to address that internal environment so people feel welcome and able to thrive regardless of their background. And hopefully we can create that better environment, a better and more equal service for the public, of course, a better sense of connection, and I will talk about connection in a moment, the people that we have the privilege to serve, and higher levels of genuine trust and confidence, and genuine trust and confidence, genuine being the most important descriptor there in that line. You may not know, but in 1962, Special Constable Astley Lloyd Blair was sworn in Gloucestershire Constabulary as the first black officer in Britain. And we're very privileged and pleased that is the case. And part of me thinks, look how far we've come. And another part of me thinks, but look how far we have to go. And that's what springs to mind and helps to drive us on to not be complacent, but to build on those earlier pioneers and not let them down. And I wanted to share with you 3 observations that I've reflected on, because I've thought about, what would I say to a group of people on such an important topic as Black History Month. But I've chosen, I think, the theme of humanity. But these are 3 observations which I heard at different points in time in my life. And I've pulled them together because I think together they mean something more to me than just individual sort of experiences in life. The first is that prior to joining the police, I studied geology. At that point in time, I had no intention of joining the police. And I just liked the idea of studying rocks and fossils and history, the Earth's history in London. But when I did join the police, I can remember at training school, many of my colleagues going, what on earth was the point of that? How useful is studying geology in policing? And I have to say that for the majority of my early years in policing, it had, or it appeared to have, little or no relevance at all. Other than perhaps in the odd demonstration or bit of public disorder, in my public order kit, if the odd rock flew over and bounced off my helmet, at least I was able to tell whether it was sedimentary, igneous or metamorphic. But apart from that, a geology degree didn't seem to fit too well. But as I've had the privilege of working with people, working alongside them, and now leading a few of them, it's made me reflect on what is different about geological timeframes in particular. Geologists, of course, have a huge time frame to consider. If you think that the Earth is about 4 billion years old, the universe is much older than that. It made me reflect, as my first observation, that the chance of being in the same point of space and time as another human being is such a small likelihood that it makes you begin to realize that it's a privilege to be alongside them. For us to be alive together on the planet, for us to be on the same continent, in the same country, in the same county, in the same organization, and here today, enjoying the same event. It's infinitesimally small, the percentage or the likelihood of that actually happening. So that's the first thing. It is quite a privilege to be alongside another human being. The second was about an experiment I heard about. I think it helped to formulate the intelligence quotient, IQ. I don't know what I've heard. Forgive me if I've got any of this slightly wrong, but it's called Weigh the Pig. And it was that's how I've heard it referred to. It was an experiment by Sir Francis Goldman, who was a statistician in 1906. And it wasn't a pig, it was a butchered ox at a country fair. And the idea was to draw a crowd. People would perhaps pay a small amount or even just guess for free the weight of the ox just by staring at the contents of it over a small fence. And at the end of it, they would work out who was closest to the weight of the ox. It actually weighed 1,198 pounds. And the winner would then get a prize. So that was the incentive to have a go. And what Sir Francis did was he asked the organizer to have all of these submissions, 800 of them. And it turned out that when they were all added up and divided by 800 to create an average, they were within £1 of the precise weight of the ox, which was more accurate than the actual prize-winning guess. And of course, that for me is where we derive the term better together, because it's evident that if we work together using all of our minds, regardless of where we're from, we are better. And to be that precise using the wisdom of the crowd, I thought was quite staggering. So it's no accident that we have called our diversity, inclusivity, and equality plan better together. So that's the second one. The third one, and I must move on, I know, was from a politician called Oliver Letwin. Now, I make no political comments here at all. I was when I heard him speak a couple of years ago, he was working in cross government in the cabinet office, and he pulled together all the chairs of what we would call the local resilience forum. Every county has a forum to deal with civil emergency, whether it's pandemic, rather topical, of course, volcanic ash, a significant incident, flooding, and how does that community come together to problem solve its way out and restore what we go on to call a new normality, because things are rarely the same again if people have lost their lives. You know, you don't really recover from that, so it's not returning to normality, it's a new normality. And each of those local resilience forums has a chair. The chairs were pulled together for a little a meeting up in London. And Oliver Letwin said, after many, many years in government, and I think it was, he said himself that he was heading towards the end of his career in government, said that people are useless on their own. And I thought that was quite harsh at the time. I can remember making my way home after the event thinking, well, I know some amazing people, individually, fantastic. To be called useless on their own seemed quite harsh, but I reflected on it. And I think I know what he means, because it doesn't really matter how brilliant we are as individuals. You can't make laser eye treatment devices or CT scanners on your own. You have to have other people to create these realities that we almost take for granted now in society. And when I put them together, all together, it convinces me beyond all doubt that there is room for all of us in the world, that it's a privilege to be in each other's company, and that we are indeed better together. So the question then remains, what do you do with that opportunity? Do you spend it being angry, saying hurtful things, or succeeding at the expense of others? Or do you spend it holding someone's hand, consoling them, and helping them to thrive? And that is a choice. And that's where individually we can make a difference and take a different route if we choose to by choice. And those are the traits that I'm trying to bring into Gloucestershire Constabulary. We would call it supportive leadership, and we've trained over 400 leaders on a week-long course over the last 2 years because we mean it. And that's proof through action. There's no point just saying it. We need to do something so that we can get better, and we'll keep going. I spent last Friday afternoon, I try and spend the afternoons on a Friday at the end of the week going to see poorly colleagues. And regrettably, we have, like many populations and organisations, our fair share of those who are ill and some of whom are dying. And this is a colleague who'd been with us for 33 years, ex-military, but spent some time serving the public in the military before that. And he was told about 2 weeks ago that he had about 3 weeks left to live. So I went to see him at his home, and a lovely individual, of course. It reminded me that nobody gets out of this gig called life alive. And so the time that we have needs to be used carefully. And if we can do it in the service of others, then what a privilege that is. So Black History Month is such an important opportunity, I think, for us to begin to do that in some style. So please help us to improve, knowing that we will actively listen. And when we make mistakes, and we will show some humility to acknowledge those and try to improve and get better again. I've said so many times now, and some of my colleagues are probably sick of hearing me say this, but I think it's right that policing is far too important to be left to the police alone, and that's why we need others to help us along the way. So please, in summary, enjoy today's event. My sincere thanks to all those who are speaking and giving up their time to share their knowledge and their wisdom to help enrich the day. And my thanks in particular to Sandra, Teddy and others who have pulled this together. These things don't just happen by accident. We've got colleagues from our communications and engagement team who've worked very hard to make sure the technology works with colleagues from ICT. And in a pandemic, this is not the easiest thing in the world to do, but they've managed it. So please enjoy the day, please interact if you can. And even if it's not during today because of the distance we have between us, if you've got some thoughts or ideas, then please send them on to us. We will consider those carefully. And for anyone out there that you know who might be from an underrepresented community who is thinking about maybe coming to talk to us about a potential career opportunity, I would urge them to take a risk with us, because I think there's more than most people know about policing, and we'd love to have a conversation. But enough of the recruitment drive. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, and thank you very much for listening. Thanks.
To be here. I've got lots of bits of paper in front of me because I was going to use links and that sort of thing. So this will be more performative than I'd originally intended. A brief bio, I suppose. My name is Stuart Butler. I'm a writer, historian, poet, and walker. I'm called a performative historian. Claims to fame. I was the first baby to be born at home in a prefab in Swindon in 1951. I was delivered by Dr. Liechtenstein, who had survived Hitler's death camps, not his family. And I know you'll find this hard to believe, but on a DNA test, my mother's genetic code is closest to the Druze communities in Lebanon and Northwest India. And I think that will make you think straight away, doesn't it, about what do we mean by race? So why am I in front of you now? Well, I spoke at the last Black Lives Matter Bending of the Knee meeting in Stroud in the summer, and although I felt a bit diffident about it all, I felt a responsibility to pass on a baton to a younger generation. And I made a pledge there in front of the subscription rooms that I would develop a community curriculum that would reveal a hidden Black presence in our local history and landscape. And this draft curriculum for the community has been very well received by a huge spectrum of opinion and people. And I take a walking group out, people of colour who come from Bristol, South Wales, Gloucester, and so on. And including Cleo Lake, formerly Lord Mayor of Bristol. And that's what I do. I do performative historical walking in the landscape. But today, of course, it's going to be within this room. But I think I'd like to let you know something about this draft community curriculum. Better Together has been the echo and the slogan through the day. And I think what we're doing together in Stroud contributes very much to this. A draft community curriculum to promote social cohesion, inform, educate, and entertain. I'll read to you our mission statement. The Decolonising Gloucestershire project reveals a hidden global, imperial, and colonial history within our local landscape. It also foregrounds a hidden but documented Black and minority ethnic group presence in the locality stretching back to Tudor times. The online inspiring resources and activities should not only educate, but also help heal rifts of anger, with the ultimate goal of respect and unity, better together. There are a number of strands involved in this: educative, performative, and recreation. The project aims to offer itself to the community in its widest sense, with flexible approaches to suit public services, community groups, families, etc. It's not for schools. Schools have got enough on their plate. It's a community resource. A quick synopsis of what's involved. Poetry and creative writing based upon text and parish register entries. Freedom's Arch, a play about the abolition of slavery, and Stroud's unique arch, which was performed in 2003 at Archway School, but we think can be revived for the whole community. Suggestions for text and book group critical reading. Guides to walking, Bristol, Gloucester Docks, Clifton, Stroud, Cheltenham, Gloucester, Gloucestershire, revealing a hidden colonial imperial landscape, revealing a hidden Black presence within that landscape. It's back in 2005, I think, that I was involved with the I Respect website, which was a project involving oral history projects with the Black and minority groups of Gloucester. And it won a European award, I think, in 2007. We've resurrected it. I'd sing the praises of the I Respect website. Within all this, at the moment, all these resources are in a temporary website. And we have the opportunity, I think, to get funding from Creative Sustainability in Stroud, which is linked to the Canal Preservation Trust, a registered charity, and they're quite willing to fund our project so that we have a permanent website rather than the temporary home that we have at the moment. But on to the first part of this lecture now, where I foreground the hidden Black presence in Gloucestershire and correct the myth that there has only been a Black presence in this country and county after Windrush in 1948. So I put it to you that there were Black people here before the English. How so? I hear some of you think. Well, we can start this narrative with the so-called Cheddar Man, a skeleton found down the road in Somerset in 1903. It's Britain's oldest skeleton from the Mesolithic hunter-gatherer period, about 10,000 years ago. Analysis indicates blackish skin. I'll repeat that. Analysis reveals blackish skin. I'm now going to skip the waves of immigration through the Neolithic, Bronze and Iron Ages and focus on the Romans. They were here for some 400 years. African auxiliary troops here. Black-skinned Roman soldiers. On top of that, the Emperor Septimius Severus was African and made Britain his base. He died in York. So what might it have been like in Gloucestershire before the Anglo-Saxons, before the Angles, before Angleland, before England? Now, I know that Jessica sent out on Friday 2 documents, and I don't really know if I'm going to have time to read all of this one, but a brief moment. He, an Egyptian, an auxiliary. She, secret keeper for the Dabonai, had arranged to meet by the sacred oak, sheltered and hidden from keen Roman eyes by dense dark woods of smooth barked beech. He, a skilled boatman from the River Nile, and now deserter from the garrison at Kingsholm, beaten, whipped, lashed and abused by officers for drunken amusement, found silent sympathy, trust and love with this mute young woman at the wine shop. She, like him, violated just for fun and entertainment, forced to play the fool, was also a skilled, rehearsed assembler. For inside that apparently dumbstruck mind was mysterious druidic lore, hidden safe within a tribal dreamscape. I won't read the rest. What happens as they go across the River Severn? They join the Silures. They eventually fight against Anglo-Saxon invaders, and they're dark-skinned. And of course, the Anglo-Saxons then rename our landscape again in a Germanic way. But I know police officers like written evidence too. That was an imaginative recreation, half fictive, half true, half mythologized. But what about the written evidence? What about the parish register entries? And at this moment, when we think about Black History Month, I think the focus is upon famous people, role models, iconic, and so on. But I come from a tradition where we like to recreate the voices and the lives of the anonymous and forgotten. So E.P. Thompson, in that seminal work, The History of the English Working Class, talked about rescuing the poor and anonymous from the enormous condescension of posterity. And I think these parish register entries now are so tantalizing. And I think this could be a focus for the future, where empirically minded historians recreate factually the lives of these entries that I'm about to read to you, some of them anyway. And then there could be creative writing within schools and communities and so on to recreate the lives of these forgotten people. I'm sure some of you will find this almost incredible to believe, because people are fixed on a sort of Windrush chronology, 1948. But out here in Gloucestershire, in the 17th century, we have 5 entries which run like this. Bisley, 22nd of November, 1603, John Davis, ye black, was buried. Arlingham, 4th of December, 1688, Hannah, daughter of Thomas Liston, a Barbados merchant, was baptized. Great Badminton, 1678, gave unto 5 men that had been 3 years in slavery 1 shilling and 8pence. I could go on. 5 entries for the 17th century. 25 entries for the 18th century. 16 entries before the abolition of slavery in 1834 for the 19th century. 10 after the abolition of slavery for the 19th century. So slaves were here in this county. Gloucester, 24th of August, 1731. Charles Powell, a black fellow, said to be in the service of Mr. Viney of the city of Gloucester. Blue livery, lined with yellow, and a dark brown wig, has escaped. There could be more. Do you remember I mentioned John Davis, 1603? The parish register entry merely says, John Davis, quote, ye black, unquote, was buried. Well, crikey, when I read that, I thought, how do I recreate his life? I go out to Bisley a fair bit, you know, it's about 4 miles up from Stroud, family connections. And I also go out to Oakridge, because this is really, again, an unbelievable thing about this county, that the Mason-Dixon line, the Confederate line, the USA, the Mason-Dixon line, the American Civil War, the Mason-Dixon line. Charles Mason from Sapperton, near Bisley. He made that line. So that global presence is always within a locality, is what I'm saying. But how do we recreate the life of John Davis, 1603? Ye black, buried at Bisley in 1603, a terse parish record entry. John Davis, ye black, buried 22nd of November, 1603. It's high up, Bisley. The wind blows cold, the rain sweeps in, the snow can settle, and vapours rolling down our valley make a lonely scene more lonesome. So how do we rescue you, John Davis, from the enormous condescension of posterity? How do we recreate your life to give a voice to you? These questions might be rhetorical, they might be existential and ontological. What was your real name? Why John Davis? How did you end up in Bisley? Where were you born? How long was your life in Bisley? Did the weather quickly kill you? Had you no immunity against the common cold, flu, and so on? Could you speak English? Did the locals point at you, laugh and mock? Were you a slave, a servant, a fashion accessory? Were you baptized into the Christian faith? Were you buried in consecrated ground? Did you cry yourself to sleep? How did your mind cope with this exile? And with this stolen identity and stolen self? Did you die of melancholy, John Davis? Was death a blessed release to you? How can we memorialize you? John Davis, ye black, buried 22nd of November, 1603, Bisley. Well, I think one way that we could memorialize John Davis, and this is part of our project as well, people of a different generation to mine, into digital mapping. They said, Stuart, we could take all these entries and we could digitally map them across the whole of the county so everybody would know. You could do that. You could do the empirical research about these people, and you could have the creative writing too. You could bring these people alive. Black History Month and a Black History Future. Imagine how that would blow the mind of schools. I won't have time to read another one, but my local church, Robrah, has a parish record entry for William Jupiter, ye Black, buried, it was 1773. And I wanted to recreate, it's my local church, I live in Robrah in Stroud, and I wanted to recreate the life of William. So and this document's been sent out to you, those of you who are watching. So I recreated I made the life, a fictive life of Thomas Jupiter, his brother, who comes to try and find William and then find dead. And I recreate his journey through the Severn, up the Severn, and along the Thames and Severn Canal to London. And I'm pleased to say that so compelling, I think, was the creation that a number of PhD students and beyond thought that it was a real life. And again, that can be the wonder, I think, for schools and people, that creative writing can take fiction close to reality. No time to read that one. Where shall I go now? I'll go to this. This is Stroud Scarlet cloth. It's been gifted to me by the Textile Trust. And this is, of course, the cloth that went all over the world. The British Army, all over the world. The East India Company. The Iroquois in Canada. And, tantalizingly, did it go to Africa? Did it go to Northwest Africa? The River Severn connects, in a way, Stroud and Bristol with turnpike roads in the 18th century. It seems to me counterintuitive to imagine that this didn't go to Bristol, the main slaving port in the early 18th century, and that this didn't go to Northwest Africa. So at the moment, we're recreating the journey of this red cloth from the slavery arch at Stroud, along the canal, and then along the Severn to Bristol Docks, where we're going to recreate the selling of this cloth to an 18th century Bristol enslavement merchant. And we're hoping this is going to go to Africa and then over to the Americas, where it's going to be stitched, and then it's going to come back to the museum in Stroud as a piece of sort of performative art and a performative recreation. And talking about, because I touched on there, about the triangular trade. I know you all know this, but just it is conceivable that some people might want reminding of the way that goods would go from, let's say, Bristol to Northwest Africa, enslavement, the Middle Passage to the Americas, and then tobacco, sugar, and so on, rum, coming back. And I try to echo that triangular trade with triangular poems, referencing Stroud Scarlet, and all done in scarlet font. I think it's true to say that it's a fascinating history, this cloth. And in the 18th century, during the time of, and the late 17th century, during the time of Edward Colston, textiles were very much foregrounded as a slavery product. And if textiles went to Northwest Africa, then I think we can assume Stroud Scarlet would have done. Having said all that, we're proud in Stroud. We've got that unique arch from 1834, the only monument in the whole country to commemorate the abolition of slavery. And it's, by Archway School, by a housing estate. People rush by on the road to Gloucester. They wouldn't really know that it was there. People rush by on their lives. They wouldn't really know that there's this unique arch from 1834. I was commissioned back in 2003 to write that play, Freedom's Arch, to commemorate its preservation and renovation. I visit it quite a lot, and sometimes And I don't know how to interpret the iconography, but sometimes I think I've seen white handprints that have been placed upon it. But sometimes I go back and I think, hang on, I think there's more this time. I'm not quite sure, but I think there are 3 white handprints that have been placed upon it, which I find quite unsettling, and slightly sort of desecratory, really. But we're proud of it in Stroud. Having said that, we're proud of it, I just want to refer to the number of owners of enslaved people within the county of Gloucestershire. If this had been live, we'd be showing the link now. I'll have to read this to you. The numbers here are people who receive compensation. Dreadful word, isn't it? Compensation for their ownership of property. The partial liberation of enslaved people in 1834. I've left my poem over there. I wish I could go and get it. It's in Clifton. We all know Clifton. What a beautiful place to visit in Bristol. We all know Clifton. 45 people in 1834 received. It's in red. It's in red. Stroud Scarlet. Oh yeah, if you could bring that, that'd be brilliant. Thanks. Yeah. Sorry about that. Technical hitch. It's called memory. Thank you. Thanks ever so much. In 1834, in Clifton, 45 people received compensation when enslaved peoples received partial liberation. In Bristol, outside of Clifton, 37. In Westbury-on-Trim, 4. In Cheltenham, 36. In Stroud, 8. In Gloucestershire, 19. In Gloucester City, 7. Samuel Baker, up at Lippiott, just above Stroud, some of his compensation helped. Have you heard of Baker's Quay at Gloucester? You probably have, down at Gloucester Docks, but there's nothing there to say what paid for that development of Baker's Quay was the compensation for his ownership of enslaved people in 1834. You wouldn't know that. It's not there, that memorialisation. The Reverend Oysterham at Sheepscombe, the Reverend Oysterham. In the parish church at Sheepscombe, there's a memorial thanking the Reverend Oysterham for his beneficence, his generosity, and his wonderful Christian attitude. He received compensation for ownership of enslaved peoples in Jamaica. The Great Western Railway, God's wonderful railway. I'm from Swindon. Swindon's railways are almost in my blood. The Great Western Railway, Mr. Daniels in Bristol received, in today's values, £86 million. In today's values, £86 million compensation for the partial liberation of his enslaved peoples. He became a fundamental financier of the Great Western Railway. That line from London to Bristol, our modern transport system, you might say, the railway system. The line from Stroud to Cheltenham through Gloucester. A third of the money for that branch line from Swindon to Gloucester came from money from Cheltenham. Cheltenham Spa, like Bath Spa, where the plantocracy resided and did very well from the 1834 abolition of slavery. The Gladstone family, William Ewart Gladstone, that famous liberal, that wonderful prime minister of the 19th century, so easy to forget that the Gladstone family received more money in compensation for the partial liberation of enslaved peoples in 1834 than anybody else in the country. And the main lines, London up to the north, again funded from that money. So what I'm putting to you is that a colonial landscape, a hidden colonial landscape, it's not only within the 18th century, it's within the modernisation of the British economy and in our landscape now in terms of our railway system. And then, moving along, sensing time, I think 5 minutes, I think. Even then let's go to the most beautiful village imaginable, Chelford. Chelford in the Golden Valley, 4 miles from Stroud, along the River Frome. And people have written about the beauty of that village from the 18th century onwards, going along the canal. the Golden Valley. It is beautiful. And yet Seville's Mill in Chelford was hand in glove with the East India Company. The East India Company that opium, tea, slavery, Stroud red cloth. So even a beautiful village can have a hidden colonial history. I'll just read a few lines. Chelford has such a labyrinth of weavers' walks and footpaths. And on a midwinter's day, with plumes of smoke rising from Chelford bottom, mistletoe in the trees, light folded in envelopes of cloud, it's hard to imagine that this picturesque Cotswold village was once hand in glove with the East India Company, as at Seville's Upper Mill, now a select residential development with the stream now private and sequestered between houses and a car park. This landscape was once a fretwork of scarlet, crimson, blue, and a variety of other delightful colours, a fretwork of profits and prices and exports and wages, linking the Thames and Severn Canal and the River Frome with the Ganges Valley, Bengal, Delhi, Bombay, Madras, Calcutta, Canton, and with Robert Clive, Warren Hastings, with Stroud Scarlet, slavery, opium, cotton, coffee, and tea. Gloucestershire almost had the sole custom of the East India Company. One last thing to finish with. I'll leave this showing. Stroud Scarlet and its links with global expansion. And now finally, I say, don't forget the I Respect website, oral histories from the post-Windrush generations of Gloucester City, www.irespect.net. And at that moment, I think I've done my half an hour, so I collect up my bits and pieces and vacate the stage. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Stuart. Wow. Now you know why the theme is understanding history, understanding our